What's going on, guys, and welcome to Yota Xpedition. We have our 3rd gen Tacoma here up in the lift, and today we're going to be installing a full skid plate set from ARB. So right here we have the full skid plate set laid out from ARB. We have our front skid plate, we have our engine oil pan and our front diff skid plate, we have the transmission skid plate, and then we have our transfer case skid plate here at the end. So we already pulled the factory ones off. We have them right here on the floor, and as you can see, these things are pretty banged up. They're actually twisted and they're not even straight anymore. These things are just a stamped sheet metal. They're gonna work for a little bit, but only to a certain extent. So with these factory ones, you're also gonna have some openings. You have this opening here where your factory jack point is, and then back there, you're gonna have an opening for your oil pan. So as you can see, this thing is banged up, and I'm lucky that the oil pan didn't take a hit as well. As you can see with this full kit here from ARB, we're gonna get a lot more protection down the whole center of the Tacoma. This is a thicker gauge steel than this, and it has a bunch of reinforcements on the backside as well. Though it doesn't have the opening for the jack point, you can still jack up from this. The only downside is if you need to change your oil, you're gonna have to take this off. Not the whole thing, but just the front one. But if you did have some sort of opening there for oil, you are potentially taking a chance of damaging your oil pan. So with the factory skid plates off, they're just held on with a few 12mm bolts. Now we have these reinforcement brackets here. On the driver's side, you have this hook. We're gonna go ahead and take a hammer. We're gonna bend that out of the way. So we have all the hardware here dumped out on the table from ARB. We have 2 M8 bolts here that are 25mm long or 1 inch. We have a lock washer on there and a flat washer. Those are going to be going on the very front of our skid plate. And then we have 2 35mm long bolts here with lock washers and flat washers as well. Those are going to go on the back of the front skid plate. So these are a little heavy. If you have an extra set of hands, I would definitely recommend it. But if you can hold it up there, or maybe use a jack at the same time, hold this up in place and get some of your bolts started. So I have a transmission jack here to help me out. We're gonna go ahead and hopefully this thing goes up high enough. We'll get this into place. So that didn't go up high enough and I didn't feel like lowering the truck. So Jared's gonna give me a hand. We're gonna get these front bolts started here.
Ryan doesn't like it. Go ahead, get it started.
So I'm gonna go ahead and get the other 2 back bolts started while he just does that one.
The threads aren't right.
All right, I'll give it to him. This one, the threads are a little wonky, so we're gonna tap it, clean those threads up. There we go. She was pretty messed up from somehow. When I took the factory skid plate off, the bolt came out no problem, but when I tried to put the new one in, it didn't want to go. Threads are fixed, so we're gonna go ahead and do this again. Should have no problems now. The only problem is...
Oh, that's butter.
Much gooder. We're not gonna tighten these all the way just yet. We're gonna wait till we get all of the skid plates in place, and then we'll come back and tighten everything. All right, so we have the first skid plate up on the Tacoma. I'm getting the hardware ready for the second one. So we have 3 here, 3 bolts that are M8 by 25mm long, and we have 2 that are M8 by 35mm long. So we're gonna get the second skid plate, get that attached to the first one. One thing that's nice about these skid plates from ARB, where the skid plates come together, you have an intersecting angled section here. So you have a pretty nice seamless transition. Some of the other skid plates on the market, they kind of just stack on top of each other, which is gonna give you a lip and something that can get hung up on stuff. So we'll just get this lined up with the first one, and we'll get these 3 bolts started here in the front. All right, so we have our second skid plate up in place. Now we're ready to move to the 3rd one, which is a little bit more involved. You wanna make sure that you have either one of these to support this cross member, or you have a jack, because there is 4 bolts here holding this in, and we need to take all 4 of those bolts out at once. And this is holding up your transmission. So if all of those come out and you don't have anything supporting this, all of this is gonna come down, and that won't be good. So make sure you are supporting this. We'll go ahead and take out these 4 14mm bolts, and then we can get the brace that goes in here for the 3rd skid plate. So from the back side, we're gonna take off these 14mm nuts, and then we can pull out those bolts. got those two nuts off and I got one bolt out, but as you can see, this second bolt here, we can't get it out unless we take off this brace. So we have two 12mm bolts here and two up here on the frame. We're gonna get this out of our way and that will allow us to get this bolt out. There we go. So as you can see here on the frame where this subframe mounts to, it's kind of dipped here. So they give you this thick washer that's gonna go in place there to make up the difference. So here on this cross member piece, we're gonna put our bolt in there. We're gonna put that washer on like that, and then we'll get this back in place. You might have to move your cross member around a little bit to get everything lined up. There we go. So we have one bolt in there kind of holding this side in place, so at least this can't fall out. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take these two bolts out, take off this little support piece as well, and then we'll take our piece here from ARB, we'll swing this up in place, and then we'll get the other three bolts back in and tighten down. Now we can swing this up into place, put our washers on the back side, and get our bolts back in there. Might have to go up or down a little bit to get everything aligned. Another thing you can do is put a pry bar in here or a big flathead screwdriver, and that might help get things aligned as well. There we go. All right, all four bolts are back in place. So we can go ahead and reinstall all of our nuts on here. We'll get that tightened down. And then we can finally get the third skid plate up on the Tacoma. All right, so we got the third skid plate here. As you can see, this is angled just like the other one. It's gonna meet this surface right here on the second skid plate. We got 3 bolts that are gonna go in there. And then we have 2 bolts that are gonna go on the bottom of this piece that we just installed to the cross member. So we got 3 M8 by 25 mil bolts again here. That's gonna be attaching both skid plates to each other. Forgot to put these on. So make sure you do that before you put the third skid plate on, otherwise it's going to be in your way. We only have 2 bolts started here, so I was just able to lower this down, and that'll give me enough room to get up in there with a ratchet and get these reinstalled. Thankfully, we removed a bunch of these from different 4Runners and Tacomas, and I have a bunch of the exact same OEM bolts, so I can reinstall some here that aren't all mangled up. All right, so we got those braces back in place. Lift this back up, and we'll get those 2 bolts started in here that are gonna be going on that other brace that we just installed from ARB. We'll grab the bolts for that. So we have some M10 bolts here. We got a lock washer on there and a flat washer, and then we have a serrated nut. So we're gonna take the bolt, we're gonna put that up through the bottom, and then we are gonna get the bolt, the nut started on top, and we can get those tightened down. And we can get this thing out of our way. All right, so we got one last skid plate, which is gonna be back here for our transfer case. We have 2 bolts on this side, one that's holding your brake line bracket on. We're gonna take that bolt out, and then over here, we have a couple of just covers on these holes here for the frame. We're gonna peel that off with a flathead screwdriver, and then we're gonna have to mark out the second hole, and we're gonna have to drill that. You have like this little plastic piece here covering the hole in the frame. We're gonna pop this bolt out, That way we can get our hand back in there and we can get the bolt started on the nut. So we got the last one here. We'll put this up in place. I'll jack this up. So we're gonna get one of these side bolts in first to help me hold this up. There's a little notch in there as well for the brake line hook to go in place. We'll get that lined back up and we'll get that started. And we'll take another bolt from ARB. We'll slip that through like that and we'll get an M8 serrated nut on there. Now we can go ahead and get the front 3 started. And that should put us in a position where we can mark out this hole up here and where we need to drill. Gotta align this a little bit. That's good. All right, so we have this bolt started over here and we have the bolt started over here and we also have one started between the 2 skid plates, holding everything kind of where it needs to be. Now we can take a marker. We're gonna mark that other spot on the frame rail and then we can drill our hole. All right, we got the hole marked out. We have our skid plate taken back down. Now I'm gonna take a punch and I'm going to make my mark here where we marked earlier. We're gonna get that drilled out. So they call for a 9mm drill. We don't have any millimeter drill, so we're just using a standard size drill. I have a 23/64 drill here, which is like 350 thousandths roughly. You can use a 3/8 drill if you want as well, just as long as the bolt fits through the hole. So now that we have that hole drilled out, we can take the skid plate, put it back in place, get all of our bolts started, and then at that point we have all the skid plates installed from ARB. We're just gonna go ahead and go over everything, make sure it's all good and tight. All right guys, that's gonna be a wrap for the installation on the ARB skid plates for the 3rd gen Tacoma. Hopefully this video helped you out. If you have any questions about this install, ask us down below in the comments. And if you wanna pick a set of these up for your Tacoma, you can head over to YotaXpedition.com. Link is in the description. Thanks for watching and we'll see you guys in the next one.